Over the last few years, South Africa has gone through one of the worst periods of adverse weather conditions, such as floods in some areas and drought in others. Low rainfall disrupted crop supply, driving up food prices, and left many with a greater exposure to chronic hunger. This is all in a country that produces enough to feed all its people, but that suffers from extensive food insecurity due to unaffordability of food, poor food supply systems, and a lack of access to land and other resources that people could use to produce food themselves. This is true in the communities within Ekurhuleni, the Gauteng metro that was a major mining and manufacturing hub. Ekurhuleni is home to many advanced industries that stand side by side with the sprawling mass of underdeveloped settlements and townships. As a consequence of its industrial activity, the area contributes greatly to the province's air pollution and thus climate change, and has some of the country's worst air quality levels. Amidst this, there are stories of hope, courage, and resilience. In 2016, Rethink Africa, a youth-led pan-African social enterprise focused on development, and the Ekurhuleni Environmental Organization, also led by young people, partnered up with the Heinrich Ball Foundation. The partnership was made in order to engage the communities of Ekurhuleni, sharing information about climate change, the environment, energy, and food security, all while gaining insights from them on how they faced up to these challenges and what actions they would be willing to take in their own communities. We took a journey to look at some of the impacts of climate change, one of them being food insecurity in Ekurhuleni. We will look at the stories of some residents who have taken their own initiative to be independent urban farmers and those whose businesses are affected by climate change. Diana and Leah are two elderly, unemployed community members who are sole providers for their families. Their children are also unemployed. Leah and Diana decided to take initiative to become community gardeners. They started food gardening at their homes and later moved to an abandoned sports field next to a local high school. They approached the high school's principal for use of the land and began to grow crops to feed their families.
wase-11 Vimbi kwaThema eSprings. Ukulima ngiqale ngo-2010. Ngangisuka eSakhelo nakhona ngangilima. Ngeza ke ngazosebenza.
Mina nguLeya wakaHlatshwayo, ngihlala la e6709 Imnyani Street. Lokuqala ukutshala, ngaqala ukutshala ngendawo zokuthi kuyahlupheka elokushini. Siyalamba emini njengamanje ulambile awunanto yokudla. Ngaqala lapha eJarden ekhaya. IJarden belincane kungakakhi la maroom. Uma kuchange isizini ngisho. Asithi njengasebusika. Hayi ebusika ziyasogolisa itshalo ngoba manje sifuna amanzi now and then azikhuli kahle ebusika. Azikhuli kahle total ebusika. Asina into esithola sithola nje leso spinach ngencencence nakhona. Isikhathi esihle lesemvula yabona imvula mayina nje noma isibangela uhlawula kula sithola khona ke itshalo ziyajabula mara ebusika kona angifuni kamama azibi mnandi azibi zinhle futhi sometimes ziyafale itshalo zife ubulaleke wabulala namabhundwana yasimoshela. Funeka umanyora ngoba kunedonga lana. Manje kungathi ngathola umanyora ziyafa itshalo mangisifake lana ziyafa nalana ziyafa konke ngitshele namathanga azange aphume ngoba kunodonga njengoba ngisho ukuthi umuntu makangathola ifertilizer inonise lodonga leli ukuthi lingabulala itshalo ziyafa itshalo zala. Mangitshele le seed ayimili masinyana kuzongcono makuyile amaplankisi sesigezavela Lozona zingcono iseed nje eyithatha isikhathi kwesinye ngize ngihlawule ngicama ukuthi angeke isaphuma kanti isazophuma.
Ukuqala ukutshala bengazi lutho. Bengazi lutho. Nje kwasekufike leso sikhathi isimo sokuthi uyi-single parent ekhaya. And fanele kube khona into yenzile ukuthi uncedise lokho onako. Ngabona benza nami ngenza lento benza. Ngibuza nabo abazi. Bayenza nje. Senza lokho sitshala. Sibona kumila kuba mnandi. Futhi ke kule sikolo lesilesi engiphuma kuso isakhelo. Ngengadi engangisebenza. Lapho ngoba beza bebengenele i-competition. Kulo competition leyo ingadi yami yafuma number 3 bathola 50,000.
Bheki is a young person living in South Africa but is originally from Swaziland. As a 25-year-old, he is amongst 3.8 million unemployed youth between the ages of 18 to 34 in South Africa. When he was a child, the basic education curriculum in Swaziland prepared him with the skills he needed to farm. He uses a small piece of land, his own backyard, but like Diana and Leah, he also farms in order to feed his family. Like many community farmers, he faces challenges related to climate change, a lack of access to land, and tools to maximize his potential.
Kama ngubheki sengina 3 years ngitshala ngitshalile thina la ekhaya uthi mara ngibona space esincane iyo kungalfilter naselina kakhulu futhi lina ngamatshe yabulala bona sinamatshe abakhona bahlala bezobheka batshalile lathi bashaya ibethirela abanye abakhona ngiyazama isifiso sami ngifisa ukuthi ngibe nendawo enkulu ngitshale ngithengise.
Makeru Farming Cooperative is a woman-led agricultural cooperative in Guatemala that was started in 2012. Led by Kim Mkondwane, the farming cooperative was started in order to produce crops for the community at large and for sale in order to make a profit. Like many co-ops, Makeru Farming Cooperative received support and encouragement from local government agencies when they initially started. However, grants and funding in recent years have been minimal, if not completely unavailable. Kim's initiative showcased the need for more sophisticated support, such as climate finance, which are funds made available to develop and replace agricultural infrastructure and help communities and farmers deal with the fallouts of climate change.
Kim Mkondwane ngihlala khona la eThema ngazalelwa la eThema and basically the co-op has been 4 years old. It's actually 4 years old this year, so we've been here for the past 4 years.
Mina igama lami ngoBaby Sikhosana. I've been ngihlala la eThema. I've been involved indirectly by Kim. I'm Kim's mom. So whenever they need help, voluntary, so I come whatever they need and I step in to help.
Igama lami uMswankosi, mina ngimember yala kule cooperative. My challenge is remember yala cooperative. I like farming ngoba umsebenzi oskas umuntu nomnyama ovamanga.
For now, umsebenzi esiwenzayo siyatshala and then we sell to the community at large at the moment because as Kagabina big markets where we can take our products and sell them at the moment.
Yeah.
On our crèche.
Yeah, siyajala, beautiful things, seriously. Like spinach,
Yes.
uzothatha a little talk, uzobona siphuma sihle ngendlela emangisayo, spring onions, potatoes, carrots, beetroots, cabbage, tomato. Yeah, actually yesterday we were talking about now trying in peppers, green pepper and all that. So we're looking into adding Ogoma products adding some more like green pepper. Otherwise I can't
Every single time we approach maybe like one of the Triple C managers with guys we need funding and stuff like that. But no, the government has allocated like billions and but nobody wants to tell us how to get there.
I wish our municipality too. I wish municipalities could get involved in what we are doing, you know. They know what we are trying to do here.
Yeah, they do
They
know,
you know. I wish they could give us that support. They have everything bona as government, you know. Like now, sending like these guys about clean emigwaqweni. If only they can help us into ezinjalo ukuthi labantu aba clean emigwaqweni bangene and start bashayile la bashayila. That will help so much, you know. That will help so much. We've been here for these past few weeks. We've been cleaning here. We need help. The people when they go past here, baya smoke like.
Sure. Climate change, ne? Issues around climate change. Okay, we're looking at the results of climate change at the moment. Yeah. Remember recent weeks we had hails and heavy rains and all of those things. So that's why most of our property is damaged at the moment because of the heavy rains and storms. And then the place, everything, our product was damaged because of that. So this climate change is for us and against us at the same time.
Food producers like Maikedu Farming Cooperative are affected by climate change. These negative impacts are passed on to fresh produce informal vendors, like Pumzi Leshando. As a small-scale fresh produce entrepreneur, she often bears the brunt of higher food prices and lower quality crop yields caused by bad weather. This is in addition to the other challenges faced by small-scale entrepreneurs, such as a few dominant suppliers imposing high prices, a lack of access to markets to sell, and stiff competition from big retailers and identical small-scale entrepreneurs who sell the same products.
Nzima kakhulu ngoba ezinye izinto ngisakhona ukuzenza enye imali iyahamba nje ihambe nje ingene nake thina ngingasabuyi lapho futhi lokho kumdozisa nzima kule minyaka nje yalesimo esishintshile manje into yokufuna siyenze khosa sinciphise isikalo sento sizokhona ukuthola iprofit singasafani nakuqala seshisile amaveli ezinto funa zehla isikalo sento mhlawumbe bengifaka amatamata ayi-6 akusethi ukufaka 6 uzofaka 5 or 4 ne-10 rand imali engiyenzayo sakhona ukwenza lokho sekufuna into engizoyenza ngenze ngokodwa ukuthi namhlanje ngiyodlala endlini ngizobhadara ini ngiyeke ini mina ngikhona ngakhala ngeseyimali ngoba ngikhona ukustokha ezinto ngisakhona ukustokha ngakhala ukuthi angisize khona ukuthi ngikhuphule isitoko isitoko samasali sesimele esikahle isimanga sokuthi imali enginayo nayo ayisiyiphansi yabona ama-prices aphakamile iphansi akusakhona ukuthola ezizwe bangatshala mkhwenya abaningi abantu abangasebenzi abangazi ukuthi benzeni mhlawumbe mina nginenhlanhla ngoba ngiyacala ukufuna ngiyemakethe mhlawumbe uma bengaboni into engabakhuthaza bengatshala abalimi ngoba bayalava abantu la elokishini isatha lamkhonyana ukuthi abantwana bami nami ngikhona ukubenzela izinto ezi-right i-future right ngayo le mali le ukuthi umuntu eceda bometric omunye uqedile khona mali akukhonanga ukuthi muse ekholeji orukuphi sisalo ukuthi abantwana babe-right bakhona ukuya esikolweni ngale mali engenzayo.
Other businesses are affected too. Youth unemployment in Ekurhuleni municipality sits at about 36.9%. This has led young people like Gijimani to start their own businesses. Also a small-scale entrepreneur, Gijimani runs a car wash business. His business is affected by high rainfall patterns that slow down profits.
Number 2004 till today. Yes, affects our food. Mabone mvula lapha prices change lesilindeo lelokuna iviki lonke asikwazi ukuthi sithole lawo masente nyana belesime silindele abantu esibawashelayo sikhulume nabo then basiprovide ngaleyo mali abayiphethe sikwazi ukuthi sidle nathi sithoke njengale abantu banokubona imvula engathi yeza badawuthi babe namadawuthi kuletha imoto ema-car wash abanye sebayazenzela imoto ngoba basasebenzi kodwa singaba right masingathola umuntu ozosisponsora ngalezi zinto eshoda ngazo equipment sinezinto zokuthi babone imvula singakhona ukumuva imoto zikhona ukuthi sizwashe asho ukuthi
All these stories so far have shown that climate change impacts people's lives in many ways. This means tackling it requires the commitment and effort of many different stakeholders, including experts, activists, the government, business, and ordinary citizens from all walks of life. Environmental activist Khomotso Ntuli gives us deeper insights on some of the issues and what ought to be done.
So I'm Khomotso Ntuli, and I'm an activist, do quite a bit of work in the climate change space. I think much of it has to do with my interest in science, human rights, social justice, and climate change is essentially a lens that you can look at a lot of issues that we're facing right now and how they're likely to get worsened and how we can better them from that angle. So I think that in a nutshell would be Khomotso Ntuli. I think there's multiple ways in which we can look at how climate change will impact our country. First, let me just say it's important to look at where our people are based. And a lot of the people in many cities, not only in Africa but the world over, are moving to urban areas. There's a very high rate of urbanization, and this imposes challenges on people with regards to access to water, access to food, and just space to live. You'd remember that urban areas do not have as much space for things like farming, which then results in people living a bit far from where the food is produced. That imposes costs on people's access to food, where people have to travel to places where the food is sold, between where they live. That has multiple impacts to it. So the challenge at this point from an urban area and urbanization perspective is having a lot of people who move to the cities with expectations that there's jobs, also remembering that people have access to land where they can produce food for themselves at home, which is villages in many cases on our continent, and they get to urban areas with those hopes that there'll be jobs. And unfortunately, not everyone that gets to the city finds that job that they were told about. And what eventually happens is you have people who live in what we call townships, which poses challenges in terms of how they access food, whether they have land to farm and produce their own food. Now, with the few people who have some access to some land, what you then wish for is for people to have predictable weather conditions, such that even when they're dealing with like limited space where there's limited food that can be produced, they at least can know that at this point, if we plant our seeds, the food will then pop up. But that does not necessarily happen, especially with an increased infrequency of climatic conditions, with hail, with storms, with cyclones, and all these other factors that then impose those challenges. So you're already dealing with a lot of people that don't have access to food, not only food in the sense of food that you hold in your hands, but from a nutrition perspective, a lot of people don't have access to that food, and with that infrequency, you're looking at challenges in that sense. The government is paying attention to climate change, at least from what we see publicly from international agreements, from curbing of carbon dioxide being emitted into the atmosphere. But I think there's something important with regards to the developmental agenda for a lot of African countries, where the dominant discourse would say that we did not contribute this much to climate change, so why is it that we should be cutting down? And even then, do we have the technology to move to renewable energy and all sorts of issues like that? That is a whole conversation on its own, but I do think that the government is paying attention. I mean, we are part of international agreements with regards to these. That is on emissions. However, you also have questions around how we deal with the impacts. So, do we have measures to respond to storms that would just wipe out people's livelihoods? Do we have ways to ensure food safety, like food safety nets and things of that sort? You do have, and I think talking about it from a South African perspective, you see a number of municipalities doing different things. So that also calls from an integrated national response to climate change impacts. But the government is doing something, I think. Whether it's enough is another question. There's also funding that is available for people to engage in climate resilient farming and agriculture, things of that nature. One of the things with South Africa is that we have not necessarily experienced these things, so it's only been recent that with acknowledgement of climate change, things like drought, which in the latter part of 2015-16, you've seen weeks on end of a drought, and I think the Southern African Development Community experienced what a lot of people would refer to as dinero. So those are the kind of things that we are now dealing with. So that also calls for disaster risk reduction, disaster risk management, and climate resilient infrastructure to ensure people's safety and not haphazard responses to different conditions as they come. So there is something that is being done, but there's a lot more that could be done. South Africa's action plan needs to speak to the issue of food security. It needs to speak to energy access. I think one of the examples you could use is with the increase in prices of electricity and how that influences like the increase in prices of food, and especially because people in urban areas, as we've seen with some of the people that have mentioned their challenges, people live in places where they have to buy food and they don't necessarily have access to the land that would allow food security. So there has to be measures and educational campaigns that teach people how they can have ways on urban farming. So you live in an urban area. Does that mean that you will not be able to farm in any way? Do you have a piece of land or piece of soil around your yard where you can plant a few things that you often need, and just work it from there, just to ensure that people don't spend as much money on food, because there's a whole lot of challenges that people experience. You have to pay for electricity, you have to pay for transport, and this for people who are challenged in urban areas. What you then experience is that people don't have access to nutritious food, which has impacts on the health system when people have to then have supplements and all sorts of things. There's also a lot of indigenous knowledge that we can draw from, where for protein, it doesn't necessarily have to be meat. You can grow beans around your yard and ensure that you have access to that. So I think this should be part of educational campaigns. Schools have ample land in a number of cases, especially in urban areas. Those areas should be used for that, and ensure that people have at least adequate access to food. Energy, again, is an important thing. A lot has been said about Africa as a solar energy abundant region in the world, and this should be exploited. There was a program in our country where there was a huge rollout of solar panels on people's roofs. That went on, but then it got stopped. These are not projects that you just start and stop. These are projects that should be rolled out in an integrated way. And it's great that our national development plan, which is the blueprint for the next number of years in the country, refers quite a bit to renewable energy and the energy mix that is required to ensure that. So South Africa is moving in the right direction, but of course a lot more can be done with regards to that. So for an average person, I think in a lot of our countries, people still do not have a good sense of climate change and its impacts. So what you have is people will see rain today and no rain tomorrow and be like, this is climate change, or climate change doesn't exist, and things like those. So what we're faced with is still a lot of education that needs to be given to people with regards to environmental issues and climate change issues. Of course, they are linked, but there are differences that need to be taken care of with regards to that. There's a lot of wastage that goes on, so we could look at it from a case where there's, for example, a drought, and people then don't have access to water. On the other end, you have rainy seasons where there's just ample water that's available. So a lifestyle change would be looking at how do you store the water that you have access to at that time. How do you use energy efficiently? Your energy usage reflects on the amount of energy that the country needs to produce. So again, noting that we are still a carbon-dependent nation, that link between your usage of energy and how this energy comes across, comes to you, reflects that sensitivity to what climate change and other issues like that. So one of the things that we need to look at is not, and this is a trap that a lot of governments or government-led initiatives often do, where we look at issues in an isolated manner, that is. So if we're talking food security, this has to be linked with issues of unemployment, with issues of youth unemployment specifically, food security, and the national developmental agenda. So one of the examples that I can give actually is looking at a lot of unemployed young people in urban areas, so-called townships mainly. You have young people who do not have jobs. You, in some cases, have some land that's available where these young people can then spend their time growing food, first to feed their families, but also to feed the wider community, and possibly then grow those into relatively bigger cooperatives that can then feed the wider community, and also generate some income for them. So what we then do when we look at it from that angle, we look at an integrated way of not only generating some income for a lot of young people. I mean, we know very well how high the unemployment is in our country. Where we could make a bigger impact is in encouraging young people being involved in cooperatives, where in groupings they would then be involved in those projects. In addition to young people being involved in these projects, then we have to ensure that they have access to markets, which is where the government comes in handy at that level, because we have a huge monopoly of large national and multinational companies that are taking care of these things, and there are ethical issues also involved, where prices of food have been fixed. I mean, there's huge cases in our country where the price of bread have been fixed, which is really an ethical challenge, where so many people go to bed without nutritious food or food at all. I mean, the numbers that are put out, you have like more than 13 million people who don't have access to food, and in addition to that, you have people who have to buy food at the price that is not necessarily a reflection of how much that food costs at that point. So the point is, get young people involved in farming, urban or otherwise, with the lens that we're using now being mainly urban. Get them involved in farming, in agriculture, set them up in cooperatives, and then give them access to markets. Give them some business skills as to how do you market your product, how do you ensure some level of quality such that the food can eventually be put out into the market, of course with government assistance to ensure that they have access to these markets. All the challenges that we've mentioned, issues of unemployment and all those things, the key thing that we need to also look at is how to involve young people. There are some people who are involved, but however, it is important that we increase the number of young people who are involved in the space, not only from an employment perspective, but also from an innovation perspective, remembering that these challenges that we're faced with now are for young people. These are young people who are going to be inheriting them, and at the later stage, with an increase in unemployment levels, they're the ones who will be in leadership positions and having to take care of people in those cases. So this is not just a question of people being employed or ensuring food security, but it's also to say that these are people who will be leading our communities. These are people who will be leading our society. And we know very well that historically, young people have been the most innovative of society. They've been leading new ways of doing things. And currently, climate change is that issue that faces us the most, and we need to ensure that we find these innovative ways to respond to climate change.
As we have seen, climate change affects people in obvious and not so obvious ways, from threatening food security to affecting different types of businesses. However, we have also seen that the people of Ekurhuleni are resilient, just like people in many other parts of South Africa. We have seen their own ability to adapt, but the government, NGOs, and the private sector have a greater role to play in mitigating against the effects of climate change. Multifaceted problems require multifaceted solutions. Part of that means empowering ordinary people to find practical solutions to the challenges they face.